Okay, what I'm going to talk about is a little bit about MentorSET, a little bit about what mentoring is and what it isn't, the role of a mentor, managing the mentoring relationship, and finish off with mentoring and leadership. Throughout there will be one or two little polls, so I'm hoping that you'll be attending enough that you'll be able to take part in those. But I will publish the results as we go. So I'm going to start with a poll. Now I know most of you are already members or at least familiar with MentorSET, but just to get an idea as to how much you actually already know about MentorSET, because then I won't talk about things that you already know. So I'm just going to pull up a poll. Okay, just bear with me. Okay, there's the poll up now. If you just tap on what you know, I see we've got some results coming in already. Oh yes, most of you have voted. I'll just give it another couple of minutes. Okay, maybe a little bit longer. See, most of you have voted. Okay. I'm not sure anyone else is going to vote now. Okay. I'm just going to close the poll and share the results with you. So we've got 40% are already an active MentorSET mentor, 20% are a mentee, 40% have looked at the website. So you all already do have some knowledge. That's fabulous. Okay, let me just go back to my presentation. Yeah, okie doke. Well, that's good. So I won't spend too long talking about things that you already know something about. I guess you all know already that MentorSET is a scheme to help professional women in SET. It is just UK. We occasionally get people who ask to join from overseas, and we manage that accordingly. And we do have one or two ladies, our mentees, and some mentors who've moved abroad, and we haven't taken them off the list. It's been supported and sponsored by the Women's Engineering Society since November 2002, and we have people in just about every SET profession that you could imagine. Now it says there are over 550 members currently. We hit 600 about 2 weeks ago, so it's growing very fast. And of course, the thing about that makes MentorSET a little bit different is that we individually match pairs. We don't have an online system whereby people match themselves. The reasoning behind this is that it means that you've got a much better chance of a good match. So MentorSET mentoring, it's independent of a mentee's workplace, and this is actually quite important because it gets you away from having a mentor who may be in your management line, which can be, it can give rise to potential conflicts of interest. It's developmental. In other words, the aim is to develop mentees and mentors. It's driven by the mentee, and this is actually quite important. And now I know a lot of you are already mentors, and you'll know that it can be quite frustrating when the mentee wants to move at a different pace to you. It's confidential, and this is extremely important, and it's supported, which means is that if you've got any questions or queries or concerns, then I'm here and can offer advice. Okay, I often get asked how we actually match mentees to mentors, and generally the way that we do it is that we look to match employment type, mainly because matching academics to people in industry doesn't tend to work terribly well because their whole work structure and the way that their expectations are often very different. We look for similar disciplines, so we try and match civil engineers to civil engineers. We try and match people at really where the mentor is one stage ahead of the mentee in terms of their career. We try and match location, although this is becoming increasingly difficult. Fortunately, most of our mentees and mentors are happy to have an online type of relationship, but we do try and match location where we can. We try and match age. Really, this means that we try and make sure that our mentors are older than our mentees, but not too much older, depending on what the mentee is asked for. And then we look at special requirements. So if someone's unemployed, they may want to be mentored by someone who's had a number of career changes, for example, and actually knows some of the things that they might have to do. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit now about what mentoring is, and perhaps more importantly, what mentoring isn't. Okay, mentoring is not a substitute for management. Now, I make this point really because, especially for in-house mentoring schemes, is that a lot of the time when an employee asks for a mentor, they'll be told, oh, your manager will do that. And whilst mentoring is a very important skill for managers, is that mentoring is a separate skill to management. It's not, or I should say, not just networking. Most of our mentees and mentors get quite a lot of networking benefit from being involved in a mentoring scheme. And part of this is because as you get to know someone, you get to trust them and you get to feel comfortable about telling other people what they do. But it is not, mentoring is not just about networking. There has to be much more in terms of development with regard to that. And I think we struggle sometimes with mentees thinking that a mentor has this fabulous, huge network and can therefore just give them access to everyone they know on LinkedIn, etc. It should be more than an occasional quick chat. Now, I often get asked, how much time commitment is there to being a mentor? And the answer really is that it depends. It depends on what the mentee needs, it depends on how fast they need it, and it depends on the mentor's available time and so on. And when we get on to talk about the process of mentoring, I'm going to talk a little bit more about how much time you need to put into it, and that it needs to be scheduled time. In other words, you need to have a plan for what you're going to do together. It's not job hunting or recruitment. And sadly, in these straitened times, is that we do have a number of mentees who are unemployed or looking to return to work. And sometimes their expectations of mentors is that the mentor will be able to find them a job. And worse, will be able to do the legwork to find them a job. Now, mentoring is, as we'll talk a little bit more about what mentoring is much more than just giving people names. It's about helping the mentee through the process of job hunting. The other thing mentoring is not is help with personal problems. Now, sometimes we find that when mentors and mentees get to know each other quite well, is that the area of connection starts to spread. And what we advise our mentors is that if you find yourself in a situation where, particularly I guess at the current times, is that the mentee starts to raise rather serious questions about finance that are very much outside of your area, is that, oh goodness me, that's the time at which to really start to step back a little bit. And because it's a supported scheme, is that we do recommend, if you've got problems or you're not sure, you just have to give me a call and I'll help you deal with that. Mentoring is also not cheap labour. This doesn't happen very often, but occasionally we find that mentors think that the mentee is an extra pair of hands and can come into their organisation and help them out. Happily, that is a rare occurrence. So one definition of mentoring is that it's to support and encourage people to manage their own learning in order that they may maximise their potential, develop their skills, improve their performance and become the person they want to be. Now, for most of us in MentorSET, mentoring means helping people very much with the career side of things. Okay. Mentoring does vary a little according to what career stage the mentee is at. At the beginning, in establishing, someone may be just out of university, having done a PhD or an engineering degree or a computer course of some sort. And mentees tend to need support because they don't know all of the various opportunities there might be out there. They probably haven't the faintest idea what career opportunities there might be. They don't know how to network, perhaps. And they need that sort of initial and fairly basic and fundamental advice and help and support. At the consolidation of their career, when they're a little bit further forward and they've perhaps had one or even maybe two jobs, they're looking at how to get promotion. They're looking at how to consolidate their career. They're looking at additional opportunities that they might have. The next stage, returning and transitioning. Now sometimes the assumption is that this is something that only happens to women. They're the ones who take the time off to take a break. Sadly, in these current times, is that we're finding more and more men, through redundancy or even choice to stay at home, need help with returning and transitioning. Now, MentorSET doesn't deal with men returning and transitioning, but it's worth bearing in mind across the piece in terms of mentoring is that men need just as much help, or certainly some help, as women do. The final stage is the completing and disengaging. Again, we don't have an awful lot of women in this, or mentees in this category, but increasingly we're finding that women need some advice on how to, if you like, reduce the amount of time they're spending at work because they're moving towards retirement, for example. And several of our mentors are retired and can give support and guidance to mentees who are looking to do this. Now, increasingly, because we're facing the challenge that we don't have as many older and experienced mentors as we would like, and I don't think MentorSET is alone in this, is that we're looking at matching two people who are at similar stages of their career. We try and have a little bit of a difference, but enough overlap so that they'll have things in common, but different experiences that they'll be able to bring to the other party. Now, I do, when I have matched a number of peers into a peer mentoring relationship in MentorSET, and we do have to choose very carefully to make sure that, as far as we can at least, that they're two individuals who are likely to be able to work in a 50-50 relationship. We do explain that this is actually quite important, that it is meant to be, at least over the period of time of mentoring, that they take it in turns to be the mentor and the mentee. For those that we've matched so far, it seems to be working very well indeed. Okay. The role of a mentor. Okay. Someone's just raised a question. Can you all hear me okay? If anyone can't hear me, can you let me know? Okay. We talk about the role of a mentor now. And I'm going to, before I start talking about this, just ask you what you think the most important skill a mentor should have is. So let me just bring up a poll. Oops. I can do that. Yep. There we go. Okay, if you'd like to just take a minute or two and let me know what you think the most important skill a mentor should have. Wow, that is interesting. Just give it another few seconds. Okay, I think everyone who's voted has voted now. Let me just... let's bring that up. Isn't that interesting? You think the most important skill a mentor should have is the ability to listen actively. And isn't that something that so few people have? Okay, I'm just going to bring my screen back. That's very interesting. An experience of similar situations. I'm intrigued by, you don't think people should need, or the most important thing is empathy or boosting confidence, but we'll talk a little bit about that. Okay. Well, this was my list. You've already mentioned that you think the most important skill a mentor needs to have is to listen actively. And a large part of that is about not just listening, but actually asking questions to actually get more information. Empathy is important, and here what I mean by empathy is the ability to see the world through the eyes of another person. And that's important because if you're mentoring someone who perhaps has a different life experience to you, the ability to think about how they see the world is actually quite important as a mentor. Boosting confidence. Interestingly, I've just looked through the statistics of what mentors and mentees in MentorSET want or feel they get most from belonging to MentorSET, either as a mentee or a mentor. And interestingly, boosting confidence is one of the top 3, both for mentors and mentees. And of course, along with the asking questions and listening, is that any advice you give to your mentee you are not telling them what to do. You are giving them additional options and you are suggesting what they could do. And this is actually important because the mentee needs to, in order to build their confidence, needs to take control and make the decision as to what they do next. That is the only way that you are going to be truly sure that they will actually do what they say they do. Okay, one of the other important aspects about being a mentor is that you respect confidentiality. Now, I know that most of you, I'm sure all of you wouldn't have a problem with this, but we have occasionally had a problem where by convoluted means is that a mentor was known to the mentee's boss, I think their boss's boss, and it started to become quite uncomfortable because the mentor took it upon themselves to actually find out some information. And to put a long story short, is that basically some of the information got back that the mentee thought was confidential got back to her boss. Now, this is actually really important because in order to have a really trusting relationship with your mentee, it's important that you respect professional confidentiality. Now, one of the things that I'm going to talk about is checking conflict of interest at the beginning of a relationship between a mentor and a mentee. And that's because it's absolutely fundamentally important that a mentor does respect what they're told by the mentee. You're there to support, you're not there to criticize, and you're certainly not there to pass on confidences. Now, there are some exceptions to this. I haven't had any of these situations myself, but if you do find yourself in a situation where you think the mentee might be about to harm themselves or become involved in a crime, then obviously you have to take a view as to whether you need to talk to someone else. Again, if you're in any doubt, then please feel free to give me a call and we can work out the best course of action between us. The other thing that's important as a mentor is that you manage expectations. It's actually very easy for us to make assumptions about what the mentee will expect. But you'd be surprised how often the mentee and the mentor will make wildly different assumptions as to what a mentoring relationship is all about. We do recommend that mentors do talk about expectations at the first meeting. Do not assume that your mentee will have the same view of mentoring that you do. And if in doubt, raise it, question it, say what you think the relationship should be. And it also helps, the sooner you have that clarity between you and the mentee, the sooner you will start to develop an empathic and trusting relationship. The other thing we have to tell mentees is that mentors will not have exactly the same experiences. In fact, it wouldn't be a good thing if they did, because the mentor is bringing difference and new ideas to the mentee. It may seem obvious, but discuss what you as a mentor can and can't offer. They may be assuming that you can take a phone call any time of the day or night. You may not want to do that. They also may be assuming that you will be able to drive to their house and they live 50 miles away, for example. They may make all sorts of assumptions about how often you're going to meet, what you can help them with, etc. And it's really important for the mentee's development that they drive the partnership and that they take responsibility for actions. Now this can be quite frustrating as a mentor, because generally speaking mentors are more successful or in a more successful phase of their career, and they've probably got there because they have more drive. And quite often mentees need a mentor because they haven't. And if you find yourself in a situation where the mentee is, to your mind, dragging their heels, then you may have to either sit on your hands or do some gentle encouragement. But please don't drive them to take action, because those actions won't stick if you do. Finally, mentors don't find jobs. I have mentioned this before. It's surprising how often mentees think this, especially the younger mentees, who can be quite naive about what mentors are able to do. And sometimes you have to gently let them down, and that is that they need to do the work, but you can support them and help them set out the process to do the job hunting. Okay. So why would anyone become a mentee? What do they think they're going to get out of this? Let me just pull up that poll. Okay, what do you think makes people want to become mentees? Okay, I think everyone's voted who's going to vote. So I'll just close the poll and let you see the results. Okay. That is actually quite interesting. Having looked at the survey that I did last year, help with goal setting comes rather higher up the list than you might think. I guess it's because we advise goal setting. It's quite often the first time mentees have ever done proper goal setting, I think. But that is interesting. Let me just pull back to my slides. Okay. I'm going to talk a little bit about managing the mentoring relationship now. And that really is the process. For those who've been through any of the MentorSET training or have looked through the brochure, the advice booklet, you'll actually have seen a lot of this. So I've preceded it just as a reminder. We'll go through the stages. The first stage being starting the partnership. And the first stage is that I, as the MentorSET manager, will introduce the mentee and the mentor to each other. And we ask that the mentee contacts the mentor. The reason being is that immediately puts them in a position of controlling the relationship. Sometimes we find that mentors will say, I haven't heard from the mentee. And that's okay. If you haven't heard from your mentee, and particularly at the beginning, in the first few weeks, then by all means drop them a little chatty email asking them for their telephone number so that you can perhaps call them, or offering your telephone number so that they can call you. The next thing is to check that there is no conflict of interest. Now, as far as possible, I will check this from the information that you've given. And in any mentoring relationship, it is actually quite crucial that you check that, for example, that your mentee isn't working for one of your suppliers, or you're not working for one of the suppliers of the mentees, that you're not in competitive roles where there's a kind of close competition between you. If it's geographically possible, we do suggest that you meet. The reason being is that even if most of your mentoring relationship is going to be long distance, that once you've physically met, is that you're talking to a live person when you talk on the phone or you drop emails to each other. I can't stress this enough. Even if you live 100 miles away from each other, if you can meet, even if it's only one time, then it does make a big difference. Discuss the objectives and timescales. This is really about talking about expectations. Is perhaps the mentee constrained by the fact that they have to find a new job by, say, 3 months' time? Are they only available on Friday evenings to talk? Things like that. Discuss boundaries and constraints, and this is really about you as the mentor primarily, letting the mentee know what you can and can't help them with. And then decide whether the partnership is workable. It's one of the reasons why we suggest that people physically meet, because if you don't feel that sort of almost a spark between yourself and the mentee, or you're finding that communication is just so difficult because you're really coming at the world from very different perspectives, then it may be that you have to make a decision as to whether you realistically feel you can work with this person or not. And then the next thing is to agree goals. And for anyone who's done project management, you'll know what I mean by milestones. For those who haven't, it's a way of determining measurable markers along the way. It would be things like, I'm going to do this research in the next 3 weeks. I'm going to aim to have had my first job interview by the end of next month. Things like that. Okay, making progress. This becomes a cyclic process. You'll start off by looking at the achieve plan, the action plan to achieve the goal, having defined the goal, setting the milestones or the markers, taking actions, and the actions here are the actions taken by the mentee because they're the ones who are going to be doing the work. Record progress. Now this is actually quite important for 2 reasons. And the progress should be recorded by the mentee. The reason we recommend recording progress is, firstly, it means that you've got a record of progression throughout the mentoring relationship, and certainly when you come to the end to review how it went, is that it's useful to have a record of how things have moved forward, because sometimes you forget these things. The second reason for having a record of progress is that it helps to build confidence with the mentee that things are moving forward. Sometimes it's mentees can get quite disheartened, or they're not very confident about what's happening. The next thing is that you review. How have we got? How are we doing? Are we moving towards the goal? Don't give up. That's really important, because you might think this is really a thing for the mentees, but sometimes the mentee makes such slow progress, at least from your perspective. So don't give up. Help them to revise their goals if that's what's needed. Help them to put together a better action plan that fits more with their ability to commit and their time availability and their skills. And then keep going round until you get to goals that the mentee has set that they want to achieve. Okay, mentoring relationships aren't indefinite. They should last for a finite time, and this can vary from usually 6 months to about 2 years. Now, if the mentee's got specific targets in terms of timescales, which might be getting a new job by a certain period of time, then that may be a relatively short period. It's actually important to have this discussion because it's part of the understanding the expectations the mentee has about how you're able to help them. And it's time to finish when either your goals are complete and your targets are met. The mentee is able to make decisions without support if it's an ongoing thing that they want in terms of maybe building confidence or so on. It's also time to finish if no progress is being made. Sadly, it does happen, and sometimes for all sorts of reasons. For example, we've had mentees who've started a family, who've moved abroad, who've changed a job or had difficult personal circumstances and are unable for those reasons to continue with a mentoring relationship. If that happens, and it could be that you as a mentor don't hear from your mentee, say, for a couple of months, or their email starts bouncing back, that's the time at which to come back to whoever's running your mentoring scheme, in MentorSET's case to me, and say, I think we've reached a point where the mentoring relationship is finished. And it's actually quite important to do that. Sometimes what you thought was a good relationship just for whatever reason doesn't develop, and you're finding that it becomes more and more difficult to work with the other person. It happens. It's happened a few times. It's no one's fault, but it's important to recognize that you redraw a line, and for the mentee will find them a new mentor if that's what's appropriate, and will find you as a mentor a new mentee accordingly. But the important thing is that they don't just drift on. Now, quite often, mentors and mentees stay friends, and that's absolutely fine. In fact, if the relationship has worked out well, that is exactly what we would expect to happen. They become part of each other's networks as well. But the actual specific mentoring partnership has reached its conclusion. Okay, and when you find yourself in a position where you think the partnership is complete, I hesitate to use the word over, but you know what I mean. Don't be afraid to discuss it with your mentoring partner. What often happens is that people come to me and say, I want to end the relationship. And I say, have you discussed it with your mentor or your mentee? And they say, no. And I say, well, if you're comfortable, better to do that, because obviously that gives you a degree of control, than to ask me to do it. I will do it if that's what's required. The main reason for that is that it's important that partnership can be ended without blame. That this is really in a situation where the relationship is not finished at the point of achieving a goal. And as I mentioned, many carry on meeting informally because you're now part of each other's network. Okay, you've listened to me for a little while now. Let's have your thoughts on what you think the sort of problems you might encounter as a mentor, or have encountered as a mentor. Oops, let me just bring up the right poll. Okay, let's just launch that. Okay. Just give you another minute or two. Okay. Is anyone else going to vote? No? Okay, I'll close the poll now. Okay, I'll just share those results with you. Okay, I can see that the main problem you think you're going to encounter is lack of response from the mentee. Yep, that's kind of what we're seeing too. We don't tend to see too many people pulled into personal problems, but no rapport. It's one of those things is that, especially if I haven't met the mentee and mentor before, I often don't know whether there's going to be some psychological element that will not allow rapport to take place. But one of the reasons we ask you for your keywords is to give me some idea as to the sorts of things that you consider to be important. Okay, I'm just going to hide that and go back to the presentation. There you go. So, some of the things to think about. How would you build rapport? How would you agree goals? How would you agree appropriate communications? And what issues or concerns might your mentee have? What sort of challenges do you think you might have? And how would you set expectations? What questions would you ask, and what other help might be appropriate? Now, for anyone who's interested, I will make these slides available afterwards. I am also recording this and will make the recording available on the MentorSET website. Don't worry, there won't be a list of attendees as part of that. But if you'd like to have this list, it's a very good checklist for when you're starting a mentoring relationship, or even for reviewing how your relationship is going. Okay. It isn't all about the mentee, however, because mentors get benefit out of being in a mentoring scheme as well. And what I'd like to ask you is, what do you think, and I know quite a few of you are mentors, what do you think the greatest benefit to you as a mentor might be, or is? Let me just launch that. So there we go. Sorry, I'm making you do all the work this afternoon. Okay, is anyone else to vote? Let's give it another few seconds. Wow. Interesting. Well, the survey I did last year certainly would indicate that that was the top reason for becoming a mentor. Interestingly, the other three elements there, improved coaching and management skills, and improved self-esteem, confidence, and improved understanding of your sector, were also very high up in terms of benefits for being a mentor. But satisfaction from helping someone develop is the usual reason for people choosing to become a mentor in the first place. Okay, let's go back to the presentation. Okay, I think we've covered some of those. One of the interesting ones that wasn't on the poll is seeing someone learn from your mistakes. And that's really about being able to share your experience, good and bad, with your mentee. Interestingly, mentees think this is a very strong benefit, and that's being able to learn from somebody else's mistakes. So if you're hesitant about sharing that with your mentee, perhaps you might want to think twice about that. Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about leadership now, and that is that there are certain key skills that leaders need, and that's the ability to motivate people to set and achieve goals, to help people to grow, to build confidence, to share, and ultimately to help people become more effective in their jobs. Now, for the more alert of you, you will have noticed that these are all skills that you learn from being a mentor. So I often get asked, well, what's the benefit to the organisation of mentoring? Well, here are some of the reasons. Mentoring helps to grow the number of women in leadership roles. Well, women mentoring schemes like MentorSET, obviously. Mentoring women increases the diversity. Now, the thing about increasing diversity is that it increases the overall pool of people amongst whom you've got to select the very best. And obviously, the more people in that pool, the better. And mentoring women helps women to stay in that pool of people ready to do various of the set jobs. Because at the moment, certainly within IT, I think it's about 20% of BCS membership of women, and the percentage within engineering is even less. I think it's around 11%. So obviously, if we could encourage even half as many women to stay in those sectors as do currently, it increases the pool in which organisations have to choose the very best people. We've talked a little bit about the skills that mentors learn that helps them to become better leaders and better managers. And mentoring is often a very cost-effective way to help people grow because it increases the level of trust within an organisation, it increases knowledge, and it's generally a much cheaper and more effective way of increasing skills and developing people than just sticking them on a training course. Okay, I'm going to leave you with a last thought here from one of my favourite people, Benjamin Disraeli, and that is, especially for mentors, that the greatest good you can do for another is not just to share your riches, but to reveal to him his own. And that is realistically the role of a mentor.